Hey guys, I'm Phoenix Gray, and this is LitRPG Happy Hour, where I sample LitRPG and alcoholic beverages. Feel free to drink along if you dare. Today I'll be reading a sample of Bone Dungeon, Elemental Dungeon Number 1 by Jonathan Smidt, and I will be playing a game along with it called Hey You, where I will take a drink anytime another character says the main character's name. If you want to follow along, pause this video and download a copy of the book sample at the link provided, or you can just take a drink whenever I do. As a disclaimer, I do not read every book that I drink to. This is all for fun and to help spread the word about LitRPG and these awesome books. Having said that, let's get started. Today I'm going to be drinking Karbach's Chocolate Stout because they totally ripped off Willy Wonka's thing and got me to buy it. As you can probably guess, I do like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and I really also love a good chocolate stout, which unfortunately there aren't many of, and this is no exception to that rule. It's not a very strong tasting chocolate stout. I've had it before. But this is also the first Dungeon Core book I'm reading, so that's a little bit interesting to me. I'm really curious what it's going to be like. So let me pop this open and let's get started. Chapter 1. For your sins against the church, sins. And what perverse world did rushing to help someone screaming in distress count as a sin? Sheesh. We hereby assign your punishment, death. Death. That seemed a bit drastic. Then again, Ryan had attacked a High Inquisitor, but the man had ordered those innocent people to be beaten. There was no way the church would condone this type of action by its followers. Oh wait, this was the church. Will you repent in your last moments, heathen? The man at Ryan's side, clad in all white, was practically oozing distaste for him, though he had done nothing wrong. Ryan opened his mouth to speak, to protest, but his cries were muffled behind the gag they had placed on him. Well, that's just not fair. Even now you refuse to repent, and so, as the hand of the goddess of justice, I set forth your sentence and act upon it. The priest's hand moved, and the blade of the guillotine came crashing down. Damn. Ryan's head left his body, and he watched in awe as the whole world turned upside down. Part of him had been hoping to at least ruin the high priest's robe with his blood, but no such luck. Of all the branches of the church to arrive in his small town, why did it have to be the Zealots of the Light? The only sin Ryan had committed was trying to be a good man, certainly a better one than the corrupt followers of the goddess. His eyes focused on the bright, golden sun above for a moment, before his mind drifted off and his world went black. I am sorry, child, for the unjust end of your life, a woman's voice whispered in his mind. Ryan opened his eyes, startled by the emptiness around him. Was he dead? He was pretty sure you died when your head was cut off. The least I can do, to atone for your sins of my followers, is grant you another life. Ryan glanced around, but there was no one. His body, completely intact, was simply floating in nothingness. Stay pure to your heart, young man, and I hope you continue to walk the path of righteousness. The world started to turn dark. Whatever was going on, Ryan was confused. As a heaviness filled his mind, all he could think of was how unlucky the whole ordeal had been. He wondered if he was hallucinating, but deep in his heart he knew he really was dead. Scene break. Wake up! A voice loud and shrill pulled him from darkness. How long had he been asleep? Hello, the voice continued, louder this time. Ryan opened his eyes as visions, memories flashed through his mind and disappeared. Who am I? An image of a man in white, a movement, a giant blade. Ugh, the church. Wait, what's a church? Anyone in there? The speaker, a small floating thing, stared at him. She. Ryan was pretty sure it was a she. Appeared to be a young woman, judging from her simple white dress and long golden hair. However, she definitely wasn't human. Feathery wings sprouted from her back, and she glowed with a faint golden light. Ryan tried to respond, but realized he couldn't. With a quick glance, he realized a lot of things. First, he had no mouth. Second, he was certain he didn't have any eyes, yet he could somehow see in 360 degrees around him. Third, his body was a glowing white sphere. Had he always been a glowing white sphere? The more he inspected himself, he realized he was made of some sort of glowing stone. Oh, you are awake, the tiny woman flapped her wings in excitement. The motion sent her flying into the ceiling above Ryan. If he had a mouth, he would have laughed. He took in his surroundings, a small confined space with stone and dirt all around. Was he underground? Had he always lived down there? The woman in front of him lowered herself to his eye level, so to speak, and smiled. What's your name? Ryan? The name came to the surface of his mind, and he clung to it. That's right, he was definitely a Ryan, but he still had no way to speak. The woman stared at him in silence. After a long while, she shook her head, laughing. Oh, that's right. I have to complete our bond first. Her body started to glow brighter, and she leaned forward, wrapping her arms around him. Their two lights blended, and she gently kissed the top of his stone. In that instant, Ryan felt a flash of energy rush through him, the light emanating from him filling the room. At the same time, he felt a strange stream of thoughts, a consciousness in his mind. Reaching out internally, he saw the woman shudder as he engaged it. "Hello?" he thought to her. She beamed. "Hello!" Her voice was filled with excitement. "Who are you?" Ryan was thoroughly confused about what exactly was going on. One moment he was in darkness, and now this. "Oh, of course you don't know. Sorry, I'm just as new to all this as you are." She fluttered around him, suddenly nervous. "My name is Aaron." Ryan, he projected his name through their bond. They sat there for a moment, Aaron's face growing steadily redder. The continued silence started to feel awkward, and it seemed like Aaron was going to be the one to break it. "So, Aaron, what exactly are you, and more importantly, what am I?" For some reason, he had no idea. Strange. "Well, I'm a celestial fairy." She spread her wings wide, beaming with pride. "And you, Ryan, are a dungeon." Alright, that's the first one. I cheated and took 2. I might do that a few times. Chapter 2. A dungeon? What does that mean? For a fleeting moment, Ryan's mind screamed that this was wrong, but then the thought vanished. "Technically, you are a dungeon core," Aaron pulled his attention back to her. "You are a soul, trapped inside of a magical gem." "My soul is trapped? What was I before?" Aaron waved her hand across his face. "Not important." He thought it was important. "What is important," she said, "is that we get to work." "Don't you think we're moving a bit fast?" Ryan's mind was spinning, and Aaron wasn't doing a good job at explaining anything. "Fast? Fast?" she wailed. "Do you have any idea how long I've been stuck in this cramped, dirty hole?" He didn't. In fact, he really didn't have any sense of time in their hole. Considering I just woke up and have no recollection of anything before then, I'm going to say no." The fairy crossed her arms and wings across her chest, annoyed. "No need to be sarcastic," she sighed. "For your information, the goddess of justice sent me down here over a month ago." "Goddess of justice?" "Yes, the deity that rules over righteousness and justice in the world. The best goddess there is." The memory of a voice tickled across Ryan's mind before it too was eaten by the darkness. He was getting tired of these memories being stolen away. "She sent me down here," Aaron continued, "telling me a new dungeon was about to be born." "Me?" "Yes, though I didn't realize you would be asleep for a month." "Well, you could have tried to wake me up." "What do you think I've been doing? Ugh, try to keep up." Well, now she was just being mean. "I'm sorry, Aaron, I really am." He sent a small feeling of comfort through their bond, which reminded him, "Say, what is this bond between us? What did you do?" She flew off the ground, humming softly. It was apparent she had a lot of unspent energy. Dungeon cores require a fairy to link with them in order to grow. The dungeon core serves as the heart of the dungeon and is responsible for creating everything within it. As a fairy, my task is to guide you, to ensure you grow at an appropriate pace and live a long and prosperous life. Seems tedious. What do you get out of it? Ryan couldn't believe she would willingly just help him for no reason. The world didn't work that way. Strange. Where is this bias coming from? "Through our bond, I can share in your power. The stronger you get, the more powerful I become as well. Once I've bonded to you, I can no longer draw mana from the world on my own, so I need you to help me survive." "What's mana?" Aaron huffed again at his question. They really weren't getting very far. "Do I have to explain every little thing to you right this instant?" "Well, isn't that your job?" She opened her mouth, but stopped, thinking for a second. "I mean, you're not wrong." She flew over and sat back atop his head. He could tell now he was indeed in some sort of gem, with his inner light making it appear to glow white. "How about we work out your powers as I explain some things?" "Sounds good." If Aaron needed Ryan to provide this mana to survive, he should probably get some. He couldn't help but shudder at the thought of being alone in this hole. Oh, poor Aaron. "Mana is the very energy that runs the world. Everything contains some form of mana. You could say it is the lifeblood of existence." "Makes perfect sense." "Not." "Ambient mana exists lightly in the air," explained Aaron, "and you will use mana in every aspect of your life as a dungeon core." "Alright, so magical energy floating around that I can use. Easy enough." Aaron sent an annoyed jolt through their bond at the interruption, then continued. "As a dungeon core, you can use your mana to spread your influence into anything you touch. By doing this, a dungeon core is able to slowly build and carve out a desirable shape or body for the dungeon. As you grow stronger, the amount of mana you can use, along with how quickly it returns, will increase." She flew over to the wall, just outside the range of his white light. "I want you to focus on the energy within you and spread it forward to this wall." Ryan closed his eyes, focusing within. She was right, he could feel a strange power that seemed to stir within. Gently he reached out to it, and it eagerly jumped towards him. Like a pet happy its owner had returned. It filled him with an almost intoxicating warmth. Good. Now extend that energy towards. Ryan was only half listening to her as he focused on the spot she had indicated. He urged the energy towards her, letting it go, and it leapt from him. Aaron's scream a second later brought him back to his senses. Ryan! The wall Aaron had been hovering beside was now a crater, the rubble and surrounding rock glowing slightly. Did I do it? He could feel that area now and could see everything around it as if he was in it. Well, you did, but you can't just unleash random bursts of mana. Oops. You have to gently reach out with it, otherwise you risk blowing everything up around you, including me. Her left wings did seem to be smoking just a bit, and perhaps missing a feather or two. Right, whoops. Well, now that we have that out of the way, what's next? He found this whole mana use thing very exciting, yet oddly draining. Well, now we slowly spread your influence. It's going to take a lot of mana to get the first level of true dungeonhood. Chapter 3. It took Ryan a whole day to spread his influence into a 3-foot square around him. Aaron mentioned the measurement to him, noting his core was equal to the size of a human fist. He had no reference for that, so he ignored it. So, what do we do from here? He floated in the chamber, the latent mana in his body keeping him suspended, while Aaron flew around, enjoying the new space. The entire room glowed with the pure white energy, and Ryan could feel more mana slowly filling him. Aaron had explained to him that currently his mana capacity was low, meaning he would have to take multiple breaks as he worked. As such, it took him the whole day to create his small space. At least the larger he got, the more mana he would be able to absorb, and the larger the area he would be able to work on before needing to take a break to recharge. Well, this is a good start. Aaron landed atop him, a favorite spot of hers it seemed. But we're going to need to get a lot bigger. You mean I'm going to? She really hadn't done anything other than complain about how slow Ryan was. He may have accidentally blasted through a piece of rock near her when she had started to annoy him. That stopped her complaining. Don't be like that, Ryan. I'm helping too. She sent a hurt feeling through the bond. Nagging isn't helping. He sent her a chuckle as he felt her anger rise. But I think I am ready for the next step towards dungeonhood. He was more comfortable with his mana and had definitely become faster at shaping the earth around him. He had also noted that as he expanded, he seemed to absorb the broken dirt and rock, instantly gaining an understanding of the material. And that was a big fucking moth. And, oh my god. Really, moth? Really? Alright, you chill over there. Let's see. Where was I? If that thing dive bombs me again, you're gonna get to see me flail some more. Are you listening? Oops, he had zoned her out. What had she been saying? Quick, divert. You have such pretty wings. He watched her face as she blushed and stuttered, her face turning red for a moment. Thank you? Aaron flapped them a couple of times, watching as the fine white feathers ruffled, then cleared her throat. As I was saying, this is only the first step in your path towards being a proper dungeon. If you can't tell, I'm very distracted by the moth. Anyway, she waved her hand, and 6 strange symbols appeared in front of Ryan, each glowing a different color. These are the different affinities you have as a dungeon. Affinity? That was a new word. Across the land, there are usually 7 different types of dungeons. Each dungeon specializes in a specific type of energy or specialized mana. There were different types of mana? Was that why Aaron had originally glowed gold when she met him? Was that her type of mana? Also, she said there were 7, but Ryan only saw 6 symbols. Which means the mana specialization of a dungeon determines what type of mobs it will be able to create. Mobs? Adventurous slang for the types of creatures a dungeon has. Why do I need these mobs? She really hadn't explained much of being a dungeon to him. All he knew was to use his mana to grow his influence, so he could gain more mana. You are so clueless, she sighed in exasperation. Only because my helper doesn't tell me these things. I can't just absorb all your thoughts. Aaron's face grew startled, and Ryan paused. Can I? No, that's not a good thing. Sorry, I'll do better. She seemed panicked. He could feel terror streaming through their bond. Guess I shouldn't mention absorbing her again. Anyway, as I stated earlier, a dungeon's goal is to grow stronger. One measure of strength is the amount of mana a dungeon can control, which is why growing your influence is important. The larger you are as a dungeon, the more usable mana you have, and the quicker it refreshes. Mana exists naturally in the world, and as a dungeon, you draw it in constantly from any area that you have influence over. That made sense and explained why he was now pulling in much more mana than when he had barely had any influence on his surroundings. The main way for a dungeon to become stronger, though, is by defeating adventurers and gaining experience. So I use my mobs to beat them, and they just hand over this experience when they lose? What exactly is an adventurer? Aaron's face grew grim for a moment. Well, they don't just hand anything over. When an adventurer dies in your dungeon, you absorb them, and you gain experience based on how strong they were. Experience is the other way in which a dungeon grows in strength. You know what, Ryan? We will cover experience a little later. I think it flew between the boxes. I'm safe for now. Alright, where was I? Death. Ryan remembered a giant blade, a quick slice. He didn't want to kill anyone. Alright, but Aaron, is there a way to grow without killing? I don't like that idea. Aaron's face brightened, though her eyes were still sad. She wrapped him in a hug. I know. As a celestial being, I am generally against it as well. You can slowly gain experience by spreading out your influence and absorbing new materials around you, but it takes a much longer time to gain experience that way, and the goddess told me she wants you to grow fast. Besides, adventurers know the risk and take it willingly. He couldn't fathom why people would willingly go towards death. Maybe Aaron would explain it later. But we are a bit off topic, she was saying. So, long explanation short, as a dungeon, you will make mobs which will fight adventurers who come into your dungeon. Killing adventurers equals more experience for you, which makes us stronger. Simple enough. So, I have to choose one of these affinities in order to begin making mobs. He felt Aaron's pride at his question through their bond. I got something right. Go me. Yes, each affinity affects the basic types of mobs you can begin creating. By knowing what type of mobs you will make, you will be able to begin forming the first level of your dungeon. Then we can start trying to attract adventurers. Adventurers equaled power. Ryan was all for the path to power, especially as it seemed to make Aaron happy. The killing part was still unfortunate, though. So, what are my options? He asked. She pointed to the red symbol first, which was shaped like a flame. Fire affinity starts with small lizard-like mobs, eventually allowing you to create lesser dragons. An image of a giant, fire-breathing lizard filled his mind from their bond. Those seem cool. Aaron nodded before pointing towards the next symbol, a blue teardrop. Water isn't really an option for us, as we aren't near the water, and adventurers usually complain about exploring those anyway. Alright, so far it's looking like fire. No water, okay? Next. Wind, she pointed at a nearly invisible silvery symbol that appeared to be a few squiggly horizontal lines. Gives way to various air-based wisps and elementals, as well as winged beasts. Usually a wind dungeon is higher up the mountains, which we are not. So, still dragons? Not an option, okay. Earth affinity dungeons begin with low-level animals, but quickly expand to great beasts. Images of massive clawed and furred creatures filled Ryan's mind as Aaron pointed towards the next symbol. Earth dungeons typically also have golems within. The humanoid pile of moving rocks seemed intimidating at first, but he felt it would get old fast. Ryan was definitely still liking that dragon option. Boring. Celestial, or light magic, as some call it, she pointed towards the golden symbol, a perfect golden sun. Begins with gentler magical creatures, which eventually evolve into divine. She sent an image of a beautiful unicorn, as well as a large, glowing version of herself, an angel, she called it. However, celestial dungeons usually grow rather slowly. Like I said, celestial creatures are averse to killing. Well, that won't help me get stronger, so that's out. Doesn't seem like a good path to power, no offense. None taken. And the next one? The last one is darkness. It is the power to raise the undead. Dungeons aligned with darkness raise skeletons and zombies, and can bring forth anything that has died in their dungeon as their own monster. In that sense, a dark dungeon could have creatures from the other affinities as well, but in the undead form. That seems intriguing, but Aaron didn't seem keen. Going to have to say dragons are the coolest. Ryan glanced at the 6 symbols and recalled Aaron's earlier comment. Shouldn't there be a 7th? Maybe she had misspoken. Aaron let out a sigh, as if she had been holding her breath. Thank the goddess, the church hates dark dungeons. The church, you say? Ryan saw a brief vision of a man in white, and a feeling of disdain filled him. Ryan was pretty sure he didn't like the church. So, Aaron was saying, just stretch out your mana to the symbol for fire, and that will bind your dungeon to that affinity. After that, we can really get started. Aaron pointed towards the fire symbol. Ryan grinned to himself, moving his mana ever so slowly out towards the fire symbol. I really don't like the church. The thought pushed into his head. I know what's going to happen next. And if the church doesn't like the darkness... Something within him snapped, and suddenly his mana shot towards the dark symbol. And a possibly black human skull. The moment his mana touched it, the darkness wrapped around Ryan's light and it rushed into him. It left a black imprint on a stone, the same shape as the skull symbol. Ryan, what have you done? Yeah, I kind of saw that one coming as soon as she was like, the church doesn't like this one. So this is kind of cool. It gives it a little bit more depth with his thing with the church, so. Still hoping Mothra doesn't attack me again. I think I'm safe, but you never know. Aaron, Aaron, Aaron. His cries were ignored. The fairy's emotions were a mixture of rage and sorrow. What have I done? Look, Aaron, I'm sorry. You're vile. How could you? Only evil souls choose darkness or chaos. Chaos? So there are 7. Ryan made a mental note to ask Aaron about that one later, when she wasn't extremely mad at him. Look, Aaron, I'm not evil, I promise. He tried to convey his sincerity through the bond. Something came over me. I couldn't control myself. Pull the other elements back up and I'll switch back to fire. Having fire-breathing lizards seemed so cool. Tears fell from her eyes as she shook her head. Excuse me. It can't be undone. What? But once you pick your affinity, there's no going back. You're stuck with the dark affinity. She said it with disgust. Was darkness really that bad? Oh. Why had he acted so impulsively? What strange force had come over him to make him choose the dark energy? What had the church ever done to him? It doesn't matter. Erin was fighting hard to get her emotions back in order. I've let the goddess down. She broke down again. Poor girl. Erin, you haven't let anyone down. You've been a great help. It's not your fault you got stuck with a stupid dungeon core. She looked up, a small smile starting to form. The dumbest. Yep, that's me. Dumbest dungeon there ever was. She laughed. It was light and musical. Ryan could feel himself smiling. Now then, how about you help this dumb dungeon try to work past his mistake? She flew back up onto him, wiping her eyes as she landed. Well, thanks to you, we are stuck with darkness. Nothing we can do? Nope. Well then, I guess it's time for the next step in becoming a dungeon. You mentioned something about mobs. She sighed but pulled out 2 crystalline triangles. They grew until they were each just a tad smaller than Ryan and floated in front of him. They appeared to be inversions of each other. Your affinity helps us decide what type of mobs you're able to create. Those, she pointed towards the triangles, show us your current level, as well as the amount of experience you have towards the next level. She flew to the first triangle. This is the level gauge. She pointed at the triangle's wide base. The bottom is the bronze tier and consists of 11 levels. Next is silver with 9 levels. Then it's gold with 7, platinum with 5, diamond with 3, and at the top is god tier. Hey, awesome. I'm made of diamond. Am I a 1, 2, or 3? You're made out of idiot, she laughed again. All dungeon cores are made of diamond. Besides, what your stone is made of doesn't determine your level, silly. She pointed to the bottom left-hand corner of the triangle, where a simple, much smaller triangle glowed black. This is your level. You're currently a bronze 11 darkness dungeon. Oh, so he was at the very bottom. Ouch. And this shows you're about halfway towards the experience requirement for your next level. She pointed at the other main triangle, the inverted one, which had the narrow bottom portion partially filled with a black glow. This triangle is split into 6 levels. Ryan could see 6 different lines cutting across it, each creating a larger section. For bronze, you need to fill the bottom portion to level 1. For silver, you'll have to fill the second. To reach gold, it's the 3rd level, platinum the 4th, and so on. Looking at that, it meant each level would grow increasingly more difficult to progress past. Being a dungeon is going to be hard. You caught on to that quickly. Erin waved her hand, and the 2 triangles sank to the ground. If you absorb these, you'll be able to call them forth whenever you choose to check your stats. She didn't have to tell Ryan twice. He instantly absorbed them both. Unlike the previous objects he had absorbed, though, these weren't broken down, and a rush of knowledge didn't fill him regarding them. Darn, they seem interesting. He wondered how they worked. Now, call your level triangle back out, suggested Erin. He looked at her, wondering how he would do that. How? Just think of it. Erin didn't seem to know either. Awesome. Fine. He imagined the triangle he had just absorbed, and on cue it appeared shimmering before him. I did it! At least you can do something, right? She seemed to still be a tad upset about the darkness thing. Oops. So, the mobs you can summon depend on multiple factors. First, your affinity, second, your level. And mobs get stronger as I do. He was liking this whole interrupt Erin with thoughts of his own game. She had seemed happy with his guesses earlier. Not quite. Drat, he was wrong. Mobs are assigned a point value. Based on your level, you have a certain amount of points available with which to create mobs. Does this mean I have to do math? At bronze 11, you are allotted 50 points. She pointed to the bottom leftmost triangle, and a white 50 appeared over the darkness. That's helpful. As you increase in levels, you will be allotted more points. This all seemed simple enough. So I can create 50 points worth of mobs right now. Erin shook her head. They would have nowhere to go. Ah, right. They were still in the single sphere-shaped room. So we have to expand first. Expanding took forever. Ryan wanted to see what else he could do. Correct. Before you summon any mobs, you need to create the first level of your dungeon. Just one level? He tried not to sound disappointed. He wanted to be big. Yes, your allotted points apply across all your floors, so I don't think expanding out to more than one floor would be wise at this time. Oh, valid point. He wasn't sure how much different mobs cost yet, but he had a feeling 50 points wouldn't go very far. Try to make 3 rooms for now. Boss room right before this area, and then 2 other rooms. That seemed to be the basic setup for most low-level dungeons. Aaron flew atop him again, patting his head. He sent a pained groan through their bond. The sooner you get this done, the sooner you get to summon your first mobs, she told him, sending a wave of distaste through their bond. Yep, she hadn't forgiven him at all. He silently set to work spreading his influence out. Perhaps if he worked hard enough, Erin wouldn't hold on to her obvious grudge. Besides, darkness couldn't be that bad. This reminds me a lot of the tabletop game. Boss Monster. Anyway. Scene break. Question mark, question mark, question mark. The deep reverberation of bells woke him from his slumber. His eyes opened slowly, and as he sat up, he scanned the room. The skeletons that surrounded him as he slept stood silent and unmoving. He paid them no heed as he stood, calling on the surrounding gloom to cover him. He emerged from the room, riding a wave of darkness, heading to the heart of his castle. The walls he passed were adorned with ancient paintings, relics from times long forgotten. He recalled acquiring the castle from his master and smirked to himself as he remembered the sniveling fool. He hadn't even been worth bringing back as a minion. He passed patrolling zombies and skeletons on his way, his loyal servants, all humans too weak to stand before him in life. At least they were useful in death. He grinned again as his eyes passed over his pets. Every undead face reminded him of a battle, of death. He did so enjoy killing. Perhaps that was why he had so readily accepted his calling and embraced his dark powers. His thoughts paused as he reached his goal, a massive underground chamber with a single pedestal resting in the center of the room. Atop the pedestal sat a crystal, the only one of its kind in existence. It was able to determine when a dungeon of darkness affinity had awakened, and clearly it had detected something, for the crystal was glowing with a dark light. Beside it, an acolyte, the only other living being in his castle, was clanging the bells. As he entered, the acolyte faltered and stepped away from the bells, bowing in his direction. Contact your master, he growled at the acolyte. There is a new darkness dungeon. Chapter 5. Ryan began to focus his mana outwards, spreading himself through the dirt and stone. He instantly absorbed anything and everything he touched, clearing out a space. Erin had given him a brief description of how the boss room and other 2 rooms should look, and he wanted to make her proud. While he worked, Erin curled up on top of him and was soon asleep. Apparently she thought the basic labor behind dungeon building was uninteresting. Ah well, that just meant he would be able to surprise her when she woke up. He set to work, pushing out and creating a space large enough to be called his boss room. He still wasn't sure what a boss was, but Erin would likely tell him when he finished. As such, he pushed his influence out until he had created a vast compared to a small 3-foot area room. It had to be closer to 5 times the size of his own chamber, with square walls and a dome top. He liked the aesthetics of that curved ceiling, though the room itself was otherwise rather nondescript. He would have to ask Erin about ways to touch it up. If people were going to be in the room, he wanted to give them something worth looking at. Focus. He shook his head and created an arching doorway leading out of the room. As he worked, Ryan casually called forth his experience triangle, watching the bottom portion hungrily. The plus side of this expansion was he might just be able to get another room out of it. Erin had told him a dungeon would gain a small amount of experience as it spread its influence to new areas and created larger rooms. He created a winding pathway out of his boss room, slowly angling it up. Ryan wasn't sure how far underground they were, but he figured he had enough space to add a little depth and elevation to his first floor. As he carved away, he also noticed strange variations in what he was absorbing. By the time he had carved out his second room, this one a large cavern-like expanse, he had found a few neat things. First, several different metals had made themselves known to him via his absorption of them. He found iron and copper, though Erin hadn't woken from her sleep for him to ask her about them. He had also found a small strain of gold, but again, he wasn't certain if that was valuable. The only reason the metals stood out was because they were different from the normal rocks and dirt he had been eating away. The other things he had stumbled upon were the skeletal remains of a variety of creatures. Ryan wasn't sure if it was his affinity for dark mana, But as he absorbed the remains, he instantly gained an understanding not only of bone, but also of the creatures the bones had belonged to. Frustratingly, though, some of the skeletons were incomplete. As he pushed forward with the excavation and his final room, he found himself hoping for more bones to complete his collection. "Finished that boss room yet?" Erin stretched as she rose from her nap. How long had she been asleep? He really had no idea of time down here. It was taking a while, mainly because he needed to take breaks from his work to give his mana time to refill. On the plus side, as he grew larger, his mana began refilling faster, increasing the rate at which he could work. A busy dungeon was a happy dungeon, it seemed. Once he reached his final room, he had been able to make changes without feeling much of a drain, but the boss room had taken him at least a day, if not two, to create. If he had to guess, he figured he may have been dungeon building for a week now, and Erin had slept the entire time. Lazy fairy. You could say that. He was only half paying attention to her, having found a human skeleton as he was finishing up his final room. Spiffy. That made 4 different skeletons in his collection. In the silence, while Erin took a nap, he may have become a bit obsessed with completing his sets, to the point of creating a few offshoot tunnels here and there as he searched near the remains he did find. "Well, let me take a look." Erin stretched her feathery wings and took flight, heading through the small opening he had made between his room and the boss room, per her instructions. Erin told him he couldn't completely cut it off from the dungeon, but that his room should be hard to find. As such, he made a tunnel from his chamber that snaked up and down a few times, before connecting through a small hole at the top corner of his boss room. He felt it was sneaky. "Ugh, you couldn't have made that easier on me?" Her voice was filled with irritation as it came through their bond. "Well, you can't please everyone." Ryan finished his final touches on the first room, a sprawling expanse like the second, seeming almost natural, not dungeon-made. He wanted to talk with Erin about a few things before adding to it. "I like the ceiling. The room feels eerie," said Erin. Dark stone illuminated only by a faint white glow. It was eerie, especially since the room was too large for the light to chase away the darkness. But hey, Ryan didn't have any way to add extra light. The only reason there was a slight glow was because it permeated everything Ryan had influenced. Erin had told him the glow represented objects that had been worked on by a dungeon's mana. Well, eerie can be good, right? We are a darkness dungeon. He sent his humor through the bond. Maybe she had forgiven him. Oh, how could I ever forget? She huffed as she flew on to the next room. Erin zipped around the large space, inspecting the walls, muttering to herself here and there. "Ryan?" She was inspecting one of his offshoot tunnels. Oops. What is this? I was looking for something. He could tell this was about to go south. "Oh, like metals?" "Yes, totally those." Whew, that was close. She poked around the offshoot tunnel, looking at the soil, checking the portions he had absorbed away. He watched her through the walls and realized something just as she noticed it. He had absorbed the skull he had found there, but forgot to absorb the rock around it. The effect, a piece of stone with a perfect imprint of a human skull. Crap. "What have you been doing?" she screeched. Yep, she was mad. So very, very mad. "Come on, throw me a bone." Ha, probably a poor time for that joke. "I didn't do anything with it, I just absorbed it. I needed it for my collection." "Your what?" Oh, note self. Anything dark related is a touchy subject. "My bone collection." He was quickly filling in all of the other offshoot tunnels he had made. She didn't need to know about those. It was easy enough. He found he could create anything he had absorbed with a simple thought and a minuscule mana drain. "I'm going to act like I didn't hear that for now and finish inspecting the dungeon." Her tone and her feelings told him this was not over. Chapter 6. So what did you think? Erin had finished looking over Ryan's hard work and was now sitting atop him, albeit silently. She hadn't spoken to him since his mention of his bone collection. "It's a good start." "Oh, that's promising. But it is pretty basic." "Ouch." "Well, you didn't really give me much to go on," he grumbled. "Great plan. Shift the blame back to the angry one. I really need to think about things before I say them." Erin growled and hit him. Obviously, being a diamond, he didn't feel it, but he got the message. She was mad. Really mad. "Sorry, I tend to speak without thinking sometimes." He sent his remorse through the bond. "You tend," she stressed the word, "to do a lot without thinking." Fair point. His mind was currently sneaking around the walls, seeing if he had missed any bones. Ryan found he could send his consciousness to multiple places at once, allowing him to multitask. Oh look, another bone. "Ryan?" "Oh no. Ryan, you're searching for more bones, aren't you?" So that was 2. I'm sticking to the pattern of taking 2 drinks every time I see his name. Anyway, his emotions must have traveled through the bond while he was speaking with her. She had felt his sudden excitement and figured him out. Will you be mad if I say yes?" he asked. Ryan still hadn't quite gotten used to being bonded with her. She seemed able to make guesses about what he was thinking based on what emotions she could sense him experiencing. It was rather unnerving. Her anger came across the bond, and he prepared himself for another fit from her. However, the emotions slowly faded to sorrow. What am I supposed to do with you? I'm really sorry, Aaron. He sent waves of his own sorrow through the bond. Ryan hated to hurt people, and he really had started to care for the fairy. I'm just trying to become a dungeon you can be proud of. I know, I'm just a little biased. You chose practically the worst dungeon type you could. The only one worse would have been chaos. You know, I don't remember that being an option. He really was curious about this chaos affinity now. Did you hide it from me? Erin quickly shook her head. That's not it. I would never purposely hide anything from you. Ryan wasn't sure if that was true, but he was listening. Chaos is the direct opposite of celestial. Because you are paired with me and I am a celestial fairy, chaos wasn't an option. In the same way, a dungeon with a chaos fairy cannot choose celestial. If it makes you feel better, I wouldn't have chosen chaos. Ryan didn't know what chaos was, since Aaron hadn't explained much on it, but something in his core told him he would have stayed away from it. He wasn't evil. You know what? How about we get to building some mobs? Aaron's mention of mobs drew his full attention. She certainly knew how his mind worked. Awesome, what do I have to do? As I mentioned before, Darkness dungeons utilize skeletons and zombies as their basic monster types. He remembered that, hence his bone collection. Alright, so how do I make them? His mind was already swarming with ideas. Normally, Darkness dungeons begin with making mobs from bones they have found through expansion. Ryan beamed. Well, I have found a lot of bones so far. Then try to reanimate one of those sets. Reanimate? How? Well, send your man into the set of bones you found, and it should naturally begin to bring the creature back to life. She seemed to hate giving him these instructions. Can't do that. Why not? Now who's the slow one? Because I absorbed every set I found. How else would he have a bone collection? Oh, she paused. Ryan was curious what she was thinking about. Her emotions were all over the place. Hey, Ryan, I think I just solved our problem. What problem, and does it get us to this whole making mobs thing? I really want to make some. He had been waiting a long time for this. I think I found out how I can accept you as a darkness dungeon. Oh, that was definitely more important than mob summoning. I'm listening. So part of the reason why darkness dungeons are destroyed by the church is because of how dangerous and evil they are. Well, I can guess raising things from the dead is usually frowned upon. Aaron nodded in agreement, continuing. That's part of it, Ryan. The other issue is how strong they can become in a short amount of time. How? Isn't getting strong fast a good thing? Remember I mentioned you were limited to how many mobs you can have based on your level? Yep. At Bronze 11 I have 50 points. At Bronze 11 I have 50 points, but I'm so close to leveling. Right, well, when a dungeon reanimates a skeleton or a fresh corpse that it has found and didn't create, they don't count against that value. Oh, that's interesting. And those mobs can leave the dungeon. She let that hang in the air, like it was a big deal. Ryan had no idea why, and his confusion must have gone through their bond. Normally, dungeon mobs can't leave the dungeon, Aaron explained. Excuse me. Well then. So having mobs that don't cost anything and can leave the dungeon to roam the land presents a danger, he said. That makes sense. Ryan guessed masses of undead meandering about killing innocent people would cause quite a stir. Hell, he could almost sympathize with the church for fearing dungeons like that. Almost. But I'm not going to do that, he felt Aaron's mood rise, though she looked at him with a confused face. What do you mean? I don't want to raise people from the dead, and I don't want to be destroyed before we get strong. Ryan wasn't evil, and the thought of bringing people back from the dead left a bad taste in his mouth. I knew you weren't evil. This is why I think my solution will work for us. Aaron was glowing a little brighter, and her mood was infectious. You still haven't told me the solution, he reminded her. He was glad they could get this to work, glad she seemed in a good mood, but he was still confused what her solution was. Well, as long as you promise to never raise the dead or create mobs from fallen adventurers, I promise. We can make our mobs completely from scratch using our own dungeon bones. She waved her hands in the air at the last part, a smile across her face. If Ryan had to guess, she had just come up with that name. Works for me. So can we get to mob summoning now? Alright, chapter 7. Nope, I still got half a beer left. In case you're wondering what this tastes like, because I didn't describe it, I love stouts. It's actually probably my favorite type of beer. It's definitely, well, it is my favorite type of beer. It's what I drink the most of. though I don't think I've ever drank one in a video before, which is kind of odd. I mean, it tastes like a stout, but it tastes like a very weak stout, and there's not a whole lot of chocolate flavor to it. My favorite chocolate stout is Young's Double Chocolate Stout. But anyway, I'm going to keep going. Erin's mood changed completely the moment she realized Ryan wasn't planning on using the bodies he had found as his mobs. In fact, now she seemed almost as excited about mob summoning as he was. So first I'm going to explain the basic mobs you can make as a bronze level dungeon. She had his full attention. There are two main mob types, skeleton and zombie. As she spoke, she flashed images of both to him. But as a bronze dungeon, there are 4 types you can summon, as each main type has 2 subtypes, beast and human. Now we're getting somewhere. Beasts are broken down based upon their sizes. As you get stronger, you'll be able to create larger beast-type skeletons and zombies. Ryan shuffled through his knowledge on what types of beasts he had absorbed. He had found complete skeletons for rats and squirrels, an incomplete deer, and an incomplete wolf. He had also found a single human skeleton, but it was missing an arm for some reason. At bronze level, your human-based skeletons and zombies are limited to basic versions, but when you level up, you will be able to make them tougher, and even give them armor and weapons to use. So, can I make 50 human skeletons? Each mob counts as a point, right? No, different mobs have different point values. Ugh, so much to learn. Erin held up her fingers and started ticking away at them, as if trying to remember the information herself. Small beast skeletons are worth 1 point, small beast zombies are worth 5 points. Oh, that's easy enough to remember. Normal human skeletons are 5 as well, and human zombies are 10. Are their values based on their strength? More or less. A single human skeleton is stronger than a small beast skeleton, but 5 small beasts might be able to take on a human skeleton. Variety in dungeons is key. It will take you a while to figure out the combinations that will enhance your dungeon. Most high-ranking dungeons even modify each and every floor to hold different mob types and adapt them to highlight the strengths of those mobs. Why do zombie beasts cost 5 times as much as skeletal beasts, while human zombies cost only twice as much as human skeletons? Erin stared at him for a moment, mouth agape. After a second, she shook her head. These are just the starting costs. At silver, your medium skeletal beast and zombie beasts only differ by 5 mob points, or twice as much. Then why such a large difference now? He really wanted to know. No one really knows why mobs cost what they do, Ryan. However, she paused, her face growing dark. There is a belief that the god of death wanted to tempt dungeons to summoning more human mobs than beast mobs early on. Ryan shivered at this. Just what type of being was the god of death? Well, that was dark. Ha. So, what do you recommend we make? He asked Erin. He was at a total loss, not to mention nervous about taking the first step to becoming a powerful dungeon. What do your collection look like? Well, I have full sets of rat and squirrel bones, my deer and wolf sets are almost complete as well, and my human is missing all the bones of his right arm. He wondered if something had dragged away that arm after the human died. The wolf and deer are both medium beasts, so you won't be able to use those yet. Darn. Rats and squirrels could be interesting, and a human missing an arm? Erin felt silent, thinking. This dungeon building is hard, Ryan whispered, trying to imagine the best possible combination. 50 points suddenly didn't seem like much for his 3 rooms. So I think we should use a human skeleton for your boss, Erin finally said, and if we mix up skeletal squirrels and zombie rats for the other rooms, we can at least give adventurers a bit of a scare, maybe kill 1 or 2 to help you get a little stronger. Ryan started doing some basic math. A human skeleton for his boss would cost him 5 points, leaving him with 45 points spread across 2 rooms. Should he try to even them out, or should he make the mobs harder as adventurers came deeper? Just a single skeleton in my boss room? Isn't a 5-point mob pretty low for a boss? The other rooms are going to have 45 points divided between the 2. Seems a bit off. Shouldn't his boss room be his strongest? Oh, bosses are different. They cost 5 times the basic cost of the mob you used. Your single skeleton is going to cost you 25 points and will be unique. What? That would leave him with 25 points for the other 2 rooms. That hardly seemed adequate. Erin ignored his outcry and continued. So, Ryan, how about you put 5 skeletal squirrels in the first room, and 2 zombie rats with 10 points of skeletal squirrels and rats mixed in for the second room. The numbers added up, though Ryan still couldn't get past the massive cost of his boss skeleton. Why was that so high? Oh well, first things first, skeletal squirrels. Well, Erin broke the silence that had filled the room. How do I make a mob? Oh! Erin started laughing, and while Ryan loved the sound of her laugh, this time he was annoyed. She was laughing at him, and it hurt. I'm serious. More laughter. I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you. She had tears falling down her face. As a dungeon, not only do you learn everything about the things you absorb, but you can then create them at will. He would have smacked his own face if he had one. He had been creating dirt to fill holes and manipulate his dungeon, but he hadn't realized he could do it with other things, too. He turned his focus back to Erin as she continued. Think of your squirrel skeletons and push mana into the image, willing the bones into existence. He started to concentrate. In the first room. Whoops, he had been about to try and summon the skeletal squirrels in the room with him. He had been about to try and summon the skeletal squirrel in the room with him. I did it. Alright. Ryan focused his attention, looking over the skeletal remains he had absorbed, and pushed his mana into imagining a skeletal squirrel in his first room. He felt the dark mana respond, and suddenly a pile of bones appeared out of the ground in his first room. Ryan repeated the process 4 more times. Now what? The bones weren't moving, they were just piled up. Now push your mana into them, imagine them as alive. Your darkness affinity will do the rest. Easy enough. He did as she said, and suddenly a dark mist swirled around the bones. Then the bones began to clatter, and suddenly Ryan had 5 very animated skeletal squirrels scampering around. Neat. Those little guys will follow orders you give them and will instinctively attack anything that enters the dungeon. They clattered around, the sound of bones on stones echoing throughout the room. It's a rather creepy sound. Next, your zombie rats. Right, he wasn't done. By absorbing the rat's bones, you understand the creatures as a whole, correct? Yes, he knew everything about rats. Good, so imagine a decayed rat and summon that body. How decayed? Does it matter? He was curious whether the amount of decay would affect its strength. Your dark energy won't let you make a living creature, and part of a zombie's strength is its potential to spread diseases. So perhaps give it enough decay that the flesh has begun to rot, but not enough that it's falling apart. Oh yeah, really clear instructions. Thanks, Erin. Ryan focused on the task, imagining it as Erin said. In his mind, he could see the rat, fur falling off, flesh exposed and beginning to decay. He knew that would enable it to carry disease and make it dangerous to whoever it attacked. As before, he pushed his mana into the image, and when the rat's body appeared, Ryan sent his dark mana into it. With a squeak, his zombie came to life, its decayed eyes glancing around the darkness cautiously, as it seemed to sniff the air. Ryan quickly created the second rat and spread a mix of 5 squirrel and 5 rat skeletons to the room. He was left with 25 points, just like they had planned. Next up, his boss mob. Chapter 8. So the first thing you need to do is summon your human skeleton. Before Erin finished speaking, Ryan already had a skeleton formed and walking around. It's getting much easier to call forth his mobs now that he had some practice. They both watched the monster amble about, and Ryan couldn't help but feel annoyed that it was missing an arm. Where were those blasted bones? Right, now you have skeletons, you can begin to make him your boss mob. Oh, more instructions, time to listen. What do I do? Well, if you'll look, you have 20 points left on your triangle. Ryan quickly called forth his level triangle, confirming the number was down to 20. Yep, at least we can both do math. Erin ignored his comment and continued. Now, focus on the mob and push your mana into him, willing his point value to increase. He did so slowly, and dark tendrils crept up the skeleton, the monster looking down blankly at them. For a moment, nothing else happened. Need a hand? Erin started giggling. Is now really the time for puns? Ryan pushed his attention back towards his mob, watching his triangle at the same time. The dark tendrils began to snake across the entire skeleton, and suddenly Ryan's triangle dropped to 19, then 18, more darkness, 17, it turned to swirl through the air, 16, it was filling the gaps around the bones. This is taking too long. Ryan slammed all his mana into the mob. The tendrils turned into a wave, and suddenly the skeleton was covered in a dark blob that completely hid its appearance. At the same time, Ryan saw the remaining number of his points. His point total tick rapidly down until they hit 0. Is it finished? His mana stopped flowing, but the cocoon of dark energy remained. I'm not sure. Let me go check. Erin flew from the room, and Ryan watched the fairy go. Hopefully she would be okay. A moment later, she appeared in the boss room, her golden light a stark contrast to the black mana that permeated from where her skeleton had stood. Cautiously, she flew up to it, inspecting it. Well, to be honest, Ryan, I don't know what to do from here. She continued inspecting it. You're my first dungeon. I've only been instructed as to what you should do, not what happens afterward. She screamed and flew towards the ceiling as the dark energy started to crack. Oh, something's happening. Ryan ignored her panic, excitement filling him. His boss mob was hatching. The dark energy continued to crack, and Ryan was able to make out a slight white glow coming from inside. All of his skeletons, everything he touched with his influence, in fact, held that slight glow. More and more cracks splintered across the cocoon, until finally it shattered. What is that? Erin's voice was filled with a strange mixture of excitement and disgust as she stared at Ryan's creation. The skeleton had grown close to 8 feet in height. His bones had thickened, and dark tendrils wrapped lazily around his body. The bones along his left arm had also developed sharp blade-like edges, which Ryan imagined would make decent weapons. What was really unique, though, was the skeleton's right arm. Where before there had been an annoying lack of bone, now there floated a random assortment of them, pulled from throughout the skeleton's body and suspended by dark mana. It looked disturbing, to say the least, but Ryan wasn't quite sure what they were for. Well, if I had to guess, I would say that's our boss mob. Ryan could barely hold in his excitement. His mind was racing as he wondered how his other mobs would react to the boss mob's transformation. You don't say. Erin's voice was filled with sarcasm as she flew above the skeleton, watching it warily. So what now? Ryan had definitely noticed his attention span decreasing since his awakening as a dungeon. He wanted to constantly be doing something, and now that his task of creating a dungeon filled with mobs was complete, he was already looking for something new and exciting to do. Well, now you've completed the basics of your dungeon. I would say it's time we created an entrance for adventurers. Oh yep, that sounds like the next new and exciting thing to do. Okay, one entrance coming right up. He turned his focus to his first room and, before Erin could protest, extended the full might of his influence towards the end of the room. The walls glowed a bright white as he focused on what he was doing. In his mind, he saw a straight tunnel leading from the room at a slight incline until it reached the surface. His mana responded, and a beam of energy and influence ripped through dirt and rock. His dungeon shook from the violence of the blast, but Ryan didn't care. He felt his influence hit the surface, blasting rock, soil, grass, and trees aside as his dungeon created its opening. Ryan, judging from her tone, Ryan guessed he had ignored her as he worked on his opening. Yes? He was only half listening as he devoured everything that touched his influence. He learned what oak trees were, and grass, and a strange set of various other plants he would investigate later. What he was really focused on was the fact that his influence wouldn't spread past his new opening. Even still, he found if he focused on his entrance, he could see everything around him. Vast trees loomed, casting shadows, even as sunlight filtered through their leaves. The force of its excavation had blasted a clearing of about 10 feet around the entrance, though it was clean of debris thanks to Ryan's quick absorption. You're supposed to do that slowly. Now you've gone and just created a giant hole in the ground, haven't you? Erin was in lecture mode. Well, not quite. Something had caught his attention. Say, Erin, there was movement outside of his dungeon. Figures, humans, standing and dusting themselves off. What? The fairy was annoyed at him, which he was used to by now, but her emotions suddenly leveled out as she registered his tone. What is it, Ryan? She was worried because he was worried. I think we're about to get our first adventurers. I think I'm about to get my next beer. The group of four had regrouped and were eyeing his opening. That just sounded wrong. If he had to guess, he had blasted them away. There was violent motioning, an augment of sorts, and then the largest man of the group, clad in a massive armor, started walking towards his entrance. That also sounds wrong. As the man drew closer, he pulled out a large silver sword and motioned for the others to follow. My mind is just in gutter mode right now, I'm sorry. Already? Erin was resting on top of Ryan, looking down to his dungeon core, which allowed her to see everything he could. Oh, they don't look happy. She looked down at him accusingly. What did you do? I think I blew them up. Chapter 9. A few moments earlier. How much longer are we going to just sit around? Blake was sitting with the others around a campfire, staring lazily into it. He had been excited when the Adventurers Guild had been alerted to a new dungeon awakening. A new dungeon meant an opportunity for him to finally get started as an adventurer. He had been even more excited when his father, a platinum-level paladin, had announced Blake could come along as they went to check out the dungeon. His father never allowed him to accompany him on missions, as they were far too dangerous for him. Blake was, after all, a brand new adventurer, while his father, at platinum level, was one of the strongest. Whenever a dungeon awoke, the Adventurers Guild would send out an expeditionary group to determine whether the dungeon would prove a good training ground. The group usually consisted of 3 high-level members to ensure no accidents occurred. The foursome Blake was a part of consisted of his paladin father, a gold-level cleric from the church, and a newly appointed gold-level mage from the Mages Guild. The team had assembled and departed the day the guild was alerted to the dungeon's presence, and had arrived about a week later. That had been nearly a month ago, though, and there still wasn't a sign of the blasted dungeon. Patience, Blake. His father's voice was strong yet kind. Usually takes up to a month before a dungeon is ready to create an opening. Say, Sean, why did you even bring the boy? The cleric glanced up from his book. Blake's father, Sean, looked every bit the high-level adventurer he was. He was clad in heavily enchanted plate armor, said to have been blessed by the goddess of justice herself. His divine sword was even crafted from a rare celestial ore known as orichalcum, that could only be found within the goddess's personal dungeon. Blake, on the other hand, had just reached the first level of adventurer, Bronze 11, and his gear betrayed that fact. He was armed with a simple iron sword and light leather armor. Being bronze meant Blake wasn't even strong enough to choose a class to specialize in, so he was just a generic fighter. Yeah, why'd you bring the noob? The mage looked with disgust at Blake. Noob was a derogatory term used to describe brand new adventurers. First, Sean's voice was deep and powerful, and it almost seemed like the earth around them was rumbling with his growl. Insult my son again, mage, and you will regret it. The ground rumbled again, and the mage's eyes grew wide. Was Blake's father causing that rumbling? He did have the mana reserves required to affect the very earth around him, after all. Second, more rumbling as Sean looked at the cleric. Blake's father seemed unconcerned with the rumbling, so Blake decided it must be his father flaunting his power. The mage had done nothing but complain the entire trip, after all. It was likely Sean had finally had enough. I brought him because if we deem this dungeon safe enough, I want my son to train here. The cleric sighed and nodded, turning back to his book. Blake could tell the cleric was just as done with the mage as his father was. Third, the rumbling intensified, and before Sean could finish, the ground immediately behind him exploded. As the earth tore open with a tremendous roar, Blake saw the air around the group shimmer with a golden light. The divine shield, created by his father, kept the debris from smashing into the ground, but the force of the eruption still sent the four of them tumbling into the woods. What the hell? The mage cursed as he stood, brushing himself off. Blake slowly rose to his feet as well, inspecting his body. The speed at which his father responded to the eruption told of the skill a platinum-level paladin had, and Blake couldn't help feeling a little proud of his father. Someday, Blake wanted to be a paladin surpassing even his father's level, but he still had a long way to go. He groaned as he stood, having slammed into a tree from the blast. I would say our wait is over. Sean was already back in the clearing, looking at the ominous hole that had suddenly erupted into existence. It looked like a gaping mouth leading down into a sinister void. Blake couldn't help but shiver. What power did a dungeon have, to rip the ground apart like that? What awaited him in that dungeon? He took a moment to calm his nerves, reminding himself he was with his father. Sean was one of the top adventurers in the land. It was highly unlikely anything within that dungeon would be able to even scratch him. Blake had nothing to fear. Leave the noob out here and let's get going. The mage was still grumbling as he neared Sean. How about I sacrifice you to the dungeon? I'm sure it wouldn't mind a low gold mage as its first meal. Might even help it level up a bit. Sean's voice blasted over the mage as Blake and the cleric approached the two. Sean, let us get this over with, and then you can teach the mage a lesson. He needs to be alive to provide his report to the guild. The cleric's voice was calm and soothing, and Sean seemed to let his anger fade by a small degree. Fine, let's get this over with. He started towards the dungeon entrance, drawing his sword as he did. Stay close, Blake. They began their descent to the dungeon. Blake was shaking, and he wasn't sure if it was from fear or excitement. The time for his first dungeon dive had finally arrived. Chapter 10. Sean led the group through the first tunnel, unworried about potential attacks. It was nearly impossible for a platinum-level adventurer to take damage in a brand new dungeon. What type of dungeon do you think this is? Do you think it is? Blake whispered to the cleric as they walked, examining the walls, noting how they seemed to glow with a faint white light. We won't know till we come across some mobs. The cleric's own body was glowing with golden light. I'd love to see a celestial dungeon, other than the goddesses, at least once in my lifetime. The mage snorted. No one likes those. Adventurers can't get around the idea of killing off fluffy animals and unicorns. His hand burst into flame. I'm hoping it's a fire dungeon. Rumor is you can occasionally capture a baby dragon from one of those and train it as a pet. Oh, a pet dragon would be cool, thought Blake. As long as it isn't chaos or dark, it'll do, Sean called back to the group. Blake shivered at the thought. Chaos dungeons summoned demons and were to be destroyed on discovery. Dark dungeons were nearly as bad, using dead bodies as monsters. Place your bets now. Sean's voice had taken on a lighter tone as they neared the first room. Blake knew his dad, just like all adventurers, loved the excitement of exploring a brand new dungeon. Alright guys, it looks like this is the end of the sample. Again, that was Bone Dungeon, Elemental Dungeon 1 by Jonathan Smidt. And anyway, I thought it was interesting. Like I said, this was my first Dungeon Core book. I'm curious about how it's going to progress. between the adventurers and the dungeon and how the dungeon is going to advance. So it's pretty interesting to me. Anyway, if you like this, the link is in the description. I hope you guys have a good day, a good night, a good week, a good weekend, whatever time it is that you're watching this, and I will see you guys next time.